Whose bottle of water?
Nick Saban.
Is that a sponsorship? No, it'd be Dasani. Is that like a sponsor requirement? Just looking for my own name, image, and likeness deal. Well, I just did the press conference on Feinbaum, so you shouldn't have any more questions. They're all tuned in on your phone.
Great.
Today's one of those days of departures. After all the buildup, we wrap up our coaches meetings, and I admire all of you who occupy the hallways, waiting for the soundbite and the conversation. Hopefully, you had some good visits there. We had meetings among all of our groups, even though in the middle of the day the coaches departed. Our presidents and chancellors started at 8:30 this morning. They have been really busy this spring. You can imagine with all that's happening around us. They actually had an in-person meeting 2 weeks ago. I have been in the SEC office since November of 2002. I don't recall an in-person meeting of our presidents and chancellors being added in a May, knowing that we're going to come and have a couple of days. That's how much time they've dedicated. That's appreciated by me and is an important part of their leadership role of our conference. We continued discussions about the future of college sports. I know the First Amendment being alive and well, which was Mike Salive's line. You've had the opportunity to visit with our coaches about roster structures that could change, and we'll continue that conversation. That really began in earnest 3 weeks ago with athletics directors. We paused knowing that we'd be able to come here and receive some input, engage in some learning, and those conversations will continue. That's a discussion right now, not a decision. We had a group session, which is athletics directors, faculty reps, senior administrators, brought coaches in, heard from the college football playoff about what to expect in the season ahead or at the end of the season ahead. One of our more important conversations, there was a group session with ESPN. Our presidents had their own session with ESPN leadership, so we appreciate Roz Durant, Burke Magnus, Michael Thompson, who's associated with the SEC Network, and Nick Dawson, who's in programming with ESPN, really diving deep with our presidents and chancellors, just like they did with our larger groups. Um, Tomorrow, I'm reading, so I'm learning with you at 1:30. We'll announce game times and networks for the first 3 weeks of our football season. Looking forward into June, I've communicated this earlier this week. Not sure who was around, but mid-June, we anticipate having a whole bunch more of our games announced. Very different approach from announcing schedules than what we've had in the past. We've usually had this first 3 weeks announced, and then it's not until 12 days before week 4 that we begin announcing more games. You're going to see more of these game times announced by us and by ESPN in mid-June. I think one of the advantages that we're seeing already is the number of games on ABC, so the broadcast network opportunities. Knowing that in the past you could take the season, number of weeks, so 14-week season, deduct 2, which gives you 12 games on CBS. We had 2 doubleheaders, so that was 14 games. We will easily eclipse that number with ABC, and what that means for us is the reach that broadcast TV has is substantial. That delta between broadcast and cable is meaningful, so we're excited about more people having access to our games through ABC while we continue with the 3:30 Eastern time slot. We did in the president's meeting talk about music around our games. So on my Twitter feed, it's the change in CBS. You need to take the music. It's their music. It's not our music. So the game introduction music is a topic of conversation, which is today's It Just Means More moment of my week. With all of that said, happy to try to be helpful in responding to your questions.
Did they play some songs for you?
No, we did not. No, they just said they're working on things. We did see a pretty cool highlight video with some production graphics that are new, and there was some music behind that, but it was not the music that people would be interested in.
I know it's really on the back burner when we talk about the 8 versus 9 conversation. But how much do you believe what we see, the committee and how they weigh things with the college football playoff and selecting teams will factor into any future
It's an element. So we've had discussions, I think, here where there's a thought by some when I'm asked questions, we reduce it to one particular element. But that has been an element, bowl access as a part of the conversation, depending on the positioning of your program. We're through the 24 and 25 seasons with scheduling philosophies. Somebody will eventually ask me to predict when we'll make a decision about 26. We'll see, but we can't linger. We will have at most one data set over how the committee evaluates the 12-team playoff field selection. And really, you've got 5 allocations to conference champions. It's those next 7 spots in that 10, 11, 12 range that are top of mind. I think we have the opportunity to learn a bit from that, but it's only one data point, and it is a topic of the conversation as we consider how we move forward.
Dre, when you were talking to ESPN, the executives, and they were going over everything with you guys today, the ability to flex in and out, whether that be one game is maybe more suitable for prime time compared to another
Right.
one. Have they given you guys, what that might look like when it comes to their decision making?
You,
Even a time frame, 1 to 2 weeks out, if they change it up.
yeah, so I'm looking back, Mark, you helped me, keep me online. By mid-June, the expectation is right around half, just over half of our kickoff times will be identified. Key within that will be the early kickoff window, which is generally seen as noon Eastern, but depending on the network, could be between noon and 1 p.m. Eastern. So that's a change. And it depends on network. If you're on ESPN, you'll be at noon. But those early window kickoffs will be announced for the entire season. And there's no flex to those. Am I right so far? Yep. So if people are planning the weekend in their favorite college town or going to visit with their favorite college team who's the visiting team, they'll be able to begin making those plans in mid-late June. People will talk about money, but part of our conversations and part of the relationship with ESPN allowed us to do something that I don't think is done in any other setting. So those will be locked in. And then you asked about flex games. So we will identify windows for games, and the flexing will be between the afternoon and the evening window. And the advantage for fans there is you're not trying to figure out, is it an 11 a.m. local kickoff time or a 7:30 p.m. local kickoff time? There may be a 3.5 hour adjustment between what's announced around those flex games. Those will play into that 12-day window. But again, rather than trying to figure out the whole week, you're figuring out a few hours adjustment. Platforms are part of that, and it has been that 3:30 was the first pick game, with the exception of that one primetime doubleheader. Well, with the mix of 16 teams we could have 4 number 1 games on a Saturday. So you could have, and I'm not scheduling for ABC, but you could have ABC games at noon, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Those could all be almost number 1 picks. And then you could have multiple primetime appearances for that number 1 pick. So we've frequently seen a game like LSU and Alabama fill that doubleheader. That's been one of the most frequent of late. That won't just happen once. There could be more of those primetime big games in the future, which I think can be great for the fans still, because they'll have pretty much advance notice of at least the time placement, the flexing by a few hours, but also for the viewing public that can tune in prime time. How'd I do, Mark?
You said Monday the plan was to come here and kind of have conversations with the coaches about availability reports
Yep.
and potential injury report deal. In talking to some folks, it sounds like there's maybe some positive momentum towards that, and maybe you guys are perhaps moving a little closer to a decision that wasn't necessarily anticipated when you guys came here. Can you kind of speak to that?
Sure. I just trying to be like clever. I said it was going to be a week of discussion, not decisions. So we have had the discussions. I've only been able to consume what some of you have tweeted from your hallway conversations, and I saw an understanding from just a handful of tweets from coaches that what's happened around us with sports gambling creates this need, if you will, this direction. I informed the presidents and chancellors that I did not put the issue on their agenda. They will have an interest in this, given all that they have right now, and given the length of the policy that was drafted. I said we'll come back to that, whether that is this month or next month, or later in the year when they gather in October, will remain to be seen. I need to learn from our staff what happened in our coaches' meetings and what's happening or will happen tomorrow in our athletics directors meeting. So I still think we're at a discussion standpoint, not at an ultimate decision. And I've got a little bit more to learn because I've been occupied with our presidents and not in those other meetings.
Would you
What
say
did you
that
take
if
away?
you-
Hang on one second.
Would you say that if you continue to have these discussions, whether it's the next 24 hours or in the coming weeks, this is something that could potentially be implemented for the 24 season?
I wouldn't guarantee that. I lived through COVID and everybody wanted to know when we were going to make a decision. And I kept lengthening the timeline. So we'll decide when we decide.
Greg,
Respectfully, I say that.
the Big Ten did it last year. What did you take away from that?
That they did it.
Yeah.
We really didn't dig into it. So I'll credit Garth Glissman on our staff. Garth joined our office last July from the NBA. He had a level of depth of experience there with their policy and their reporting system. That's been the biggest aid. And we've been, I think, pretty thoughtful in taking time to learn from, yep, the Big Ten has it. Are there strengths there, weaknesses there? We've allowed Garth to help us evaluate that, but also learn from the oversight and the process that professional leagues have in place, noting that we have different realities, as I've said earlier. So there's been a lot of information gathered, and I'll just credit Garth. One of the things as we were considering hiring him is that league experience he has could benefit us, given that it did touch this availability or this injury reporting as it's described there.
You said NBA?
NBA, yeah. Yeah.
Also, for the fifth grader in the audience, try to break down the roster size thing. Can you lobby Judge Wilkin? Is it going to be a national standard? I know
We'll
you're
see.
having discussions.
Yeah, that's. And I think I put that in discussion, not decision. Time frame. I think that's about us and our decision making within certain parameters. So there's the ability for that decision to be made outside the courtroom.
And just see if it fits.
I'll stick by that
A legal
statement.
framework.
I'll stick by that statement. Yeah, yeah.
By us, you mean NCAA?
Um,
Conference by conference?
defendants. Yeah.
Yes, so it will be a nationwide standard.
We'll see. Yeah,
A conference by
we'll see. Tune in. I mean, where's the intrigue?
You mentioned Garth in the NBA. What do they do up there? I'm not that familiar with their injury report. If you tap into some of it.
I don't know either.
Oh, okay.
It's in a memo, but I've read it. I can't quote you their policy. I just
I didn't know
rather than having to go grab like 6 policies, somebody that's worked in it and has those relationships can distill it. But I'm not an expert on the NBA policy. I am a bit more knowledgeable than I was before.
Greg, do you think the Title IX issue is ultimately going to be agreed upon across the board, or do you think you'll have people just try to challenge it and have it end up in court?
In availability reporting?
No, just in terms of Title IX, in terms of the rev share and
The settlement that was announced. Well, the first step is to see the approach of the plaintiff's counsel when you look at those backward damages. So that will be our starting point, is to learn from their approach. We've got great programs, revenue sports and non-revenue sports, and certainly going to be a conversation, but there is some process to play out here first.
in the payment, the back payment to former student athletes is seen as going to be weighted toward football and basketball.
Well, I'm not. That's not up to me, and that's part of what we'll see how that is managed. I know what's in that litigation, and to your point, that will likely generate some commentary.
Greg, and more of a Central Alabama local question. Big tournament last week in Hoover. I talked to the mayor on Monday. He feels there's good conversations about the future. What did you see about a record week, and then what's the future look like in Hoover? Because they're putting a lot of money, millions, to try to keep it there.
Well, we've been there for a long time. We haven't moved. I actually walked in to buy a cup of coffee in Starbucks on Sunday as I was heading to the game, and I was asked, "Is it true that the tournament's moving to Nashville next year?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So we're going to be certainly in Hoover for a few more years. They've made commitments, so you could see the entry. You could see a redone parking lot. You could walk through the facility and see enhancement plans before we play again next year. They built the Finley Center, which is an all-purpose building that really accommodates our fans in an outstanding way. And somehow, when we've gone through all of this consideration, they guaranteed me 2 years with no rain. So we've made that happen, which helps. Real credit to our fans. You know, I made some notes about, you know, ingress and egress. There's a direct way in. We were stacked up about a mile and a half onto 459 when I was driving in about 2 hours before the game. And so how do we reduce kind of the fan friction to access the facility is top of mind. Now, credit to the city of Hoover. They actually sent people out to buy bottles of water that they were handing out. And they had done preparation in advance, knowing that there'd be a great crowd and dealing with the heat, had added concession stands and access. But we need to continue to work on reducing, you know, the challenges, if you will, to access for those big crowds. What amazes me and has for a while is Tuesday night, you know, we've got 8,000 people, 9,000 people at those games. It's a school night. Those games go late. Wednesday night, the same thing happens. And as the field narrows, those crowds have built. And you see a lot of people unaffiliated with teams who are part of a tradition. I had a conversation with somebody from Orlando. An Ohio State fan came up to me and said hello and said, "I've seen this. I've always wanted to be a part of it." And I think we want to respect that we've built something special in that location, and the repetition has made that so. And then it's a centrally, I mean, really the geographic center, even after this next expansion, is just north of Birmingham. So it's an accessible place if you want to get there. You know, it's going to be distant, you know, if you're on the outer edges of the league, but it's a pretty special place. We've got 250 plus RV hookups that sell out like that. And if you ever walk through that community, you know, for 1 week, it is a community, and fun to see people enjoying college baseball in a really unique way. And the last thing I'll observe, and I've had this conversation with coaches in meetings and then one-on-one, is starting this week, they will experience what they experienced during our tournament, which is you're all ready, you're trying to prepare, and the game right before you with two other teams goes long. You might play a double header, but you're in that game. Or if you have weather and there's a game before you, you know, somebody else is making the decision about the weather. It's not a home game. You may be playing a game that finishes at 1 a.m. And we didn't have much of that this year, but I think what we do really prepares our teams well for that transition from the regular kind of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or the 3-day rotation, it may be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, into this tournament mode. Next year we'll be in single elimination format, bring everyone in. So I think the excitement of having every one of our 16 teams at one site will still be there. You're going to see pitching focus that will be really interesting to see how it plays out in coaching decisions. And then if you're in the top four, it allows those teams to set up their regular pitching rotation, because I think they have 3 games to get through to win the championship, as opposed to, you know, we've had some center fielders doing a pretty good job in relief. We may see that reduced, except for a team that might do what happened this year and go from a double-digit seed all the way through. They'll use up some arms, but our coaches are really careful about how that managed. So I think all of that is kind of a big bucket of what makes it right and what makes it fun for people to be a part of. And I'll just say again, appreciate the fans from Tennessee and LSU coming out in such great numbers. That's a number I think we hadn't seen since like '99. Was that right? '99 topped it, but for a championship game, it's been a while, so it's fun, and a lot of compliments to all of those who attended.
Greg, will you guys, and this is just a kind of a point of clarification when it comes to the baseball tournaments this weekend that are going on. Does the SEC in any way have anything to do with the review center that you guys have in Birmingham?
No.
Do y'all help out in any way
No.
with the NCAA in that?
We don't. Yeah, that the level of conspiracy that would be present in that, I can't even imagine. No, yeah, no, I think that's so watching softball. I think that's done out of Pittsburgh the same way. Our, one of the things that's different now. Some people ask me for differences. Our operation is 7 days a week from Labor Day to Memorial Day, because our video center is active all the time. And there's a little bit of a gap during non-conference basketball in mid-December, but with the playoff, we'll be engaged in that review. The officiating crew won't be involved with our teams. And then you start back into January with basketball, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I'm thinking through the competitive week, not the calendar week. And that continues, and then baseball starts. So our video staff and that team does really good work. Really good work. Doesn't mean everybody agrees with outcomes all the time, but really good work.
Do you have a favorite SEC conspiracy theory? Favorite, I mean dumbest.
What did I get? I've had this in a couple of championship trophy situations that, well, you're not smiling. You're not happy that our team won. I'm like, actually, I am happy, because to win that, I'm happy for that team. I'm sad for the other team at the same time, but yeah, there's a lot. We had a replay, and I was flying from Atlanta to Miami during bowl season. There was another playoff semifinal, and there was an outcome, and like I had decided it. I was in the air. I landed. My Twitter feed blew up. Like I can tell you, that's not the way it works.
Will horns down be a penalty this year in most competitions?
I think John's addressed that. John McDade. He'll get that. He got that during media day, so I'll let him do it.
Greg, you mentioned the successful championship, but and you've had successful championships. You sell a lot of tickets in football, the basketball tournaments, the baseball tournament, but they're all kind of in the eastern half of the conference, and the conference as it's expanded has grown with. Is there any pressure to move one of these championships, at least just on a one-off,
Yeah,
to a more western venue?
the pressure is to get the site location right, and so there are sets of championships that do rotate around, and those are campus-based championships. So I'll add one that was pretty remarkable. Our softball championship game was played in Auburn between Missouri and Florida in front of a standing room only stadium on that Saturday. That's a tribute to our fans. We actually looked diligently and have surfaced that issue, identified the issue with our membership to say, hey, we're ready to look west. We have looked west, but the opportunities we've had in other locations have just been voted as the priority. And our fans will travel, and they'll be a part of it. And remember, you think about Nashville and Birmingham, the geographic center of the league is in between. We've established something in Atlanta. We've got a longer-term agreement there for our football championship game. Greenville is far on the east, but I've talked to competitors from the west who are very complimentary of what the city of Greenville's done for us the last few years. We looked through volleyball. We'll continue to look at western opportunities. I was vocal about it, but the decisions made by our membership has created the inventory and the locations we have.
Greg,
What's the schedule for structure and format for 26? When are you guys going to discuss that?
We had conversations 3 weeks ago with our athletics directors. We just said this week, with all that's happening, we'll come back to that. We have video conferences. Probably won't spend a lot of time there conversation with ESPN's leadership a couple weeks ago just to re-engage about what that future may look like and help them understand that if we decide to stay at 8, what's absent from the schedule. I also think when we were going through the 3 years of transition, we talked so much about models, and I think I've told you there were 40 plus models. Then you narrow it. Now that we're in it, and we'll experience the renewal of some of these rivalries and some of these games, I think that will shape some thinking too. So you can kind of hear the conversation about CFP selection going through it a year. We've got some time, but not a lot of time. So it's not immediate. We've got some more immediate issues. And last year I said we wouldn't be here in Destin making that decision. I was right. We got awfully close as you're making that decision. So we'll try to move it along.
Maybe I misunderstood. I was talking about the playoff.
Oh, I thought you were talking about our schedule.
No.
This is the SEC meetings.
I'm sorry, as a commissioner.
Oh.
When do you guys, I keep hearing September that's gonna get finalized.
No, well, my position, and I'm only one
Right.
of, I'm just but a humble one of 11. Why was that the funny line that everybody laughed at?
Oh, I thought you guys.
You said it twice.
I'm but the humble one of 11. I thought it'd be wise to get through this year. I don't think we should be looking at format before we have a 12-team experience.
See how it goes.
That's my opinion, yeah. And I would, I'm happy to communicate that through you and directly to my colleagues.
And is it even worth asking if AQs are off the table or not?
Well, I've said, like, where's Matt? Matt was trying to get me to communicate. You know, I've said before, I'm fine not having AQs, but we have AQs, so we're going to have AQs.
You are.
Yeah, we've got the 5 for conference champions.
Right, I mean, conference dedicated.
Oh,
AQs beyond that.
I haven't even thought about that since it was introduced, and then everybody wrote so glowingly about it.
Right. That's-
Between that and, you know, pressure on AQs, which people prompt, I brought the quotes that he wrote, just pressure on basketball AQs, you know.
That's really the
Plenty
issue.
of feedback on AQs.
I mean,
He quoted me properly, too.
That's what college football fans want to know, if there going to be any further push for
I think
AQs.
what they want to know is that we're going to kick off week 0 with some games, Labor Day weekend. We're going to have a 12-team playoff when we're ready for it. I really think that's the focus. And I think they'll be fine waiting. Now, other people may want to know, that want to scoop the story. But I think our fans, there's probably a level of excitement for 12 teams because of how it brings people in, particularly in November, and a level of curiosity about what is this really going to look like. That's my evaluation of fans.
Greg, since you mentioned the SEC schedule, you're singing the song.
That's the only reason you brought it up is because I mentioned it. So this question is my fault. That's the way I interpret the intro.
Is there any wiggle room to keep, but you mentioned games that would not be happening if you stay at 8. Is there any wiggle room to change that so that if you just can't go to 9 games, you still play?
Like designate those. Yeah, we've looked at those models. I forget the math equation. I mean, that's really what it is the math equation. We have observed like our Big Ten colleagues have a different number of annual games across their schedule. That doesn't mean we're going to do that. But that conversation has been introduced before. It's been in the rearview mirror. Could it rise again? I'm certain it could.
Still in the rearview mirror?
Well, just because there's so much more happening now that we haven't even dug into solutions right now.
Based on those conversations about whether to play 8 conference games or 9 conference games in 26, would you say it is a spirited debate on both sides? Or do you have a feel that everyone's gonna go one direction?
I think it's a healthy discussion. I think it's a combination of curiosity, of trying to think. Yeah, there's always competitive pieces to that. My view, it's been thoughtful, been asking questions again. What does this mean for bowls? What does this mean for CFP? What does this mean with our media partner? What does this mean for where games are placed in the schedule? What kind of non-conference scheduling strategy should we be thinking about in that format? So there's a lot, and I think all of those, each of the times we've engaged in the conversation, including just a few weeks ago, the descriptor of really thoughtful and engaged, and yeah, they're going to be different perspectives, but I think that's been healthy discussion with a level of openness across the league, really to both sides.
Greg, since you brought the playoff up, I know.
So you're blaming me again for another
No,
question.
no, well, I'm gonna blame Dennis.
Okay. Since Dennis brought it up, let's reframe the question.
Well, you answered the question wrongly, so you,
Which one?
Dennis's question.
No.
No, I answered the football scheduling
That's right.
question.
Right, yeah.
I asked,
So you,
But he brought it up.
who's on, but
Who's
he
on
wasn't
first?
asking about it.
He was asking me, no, he was asking about the CFP. Anyway,
What, there was some discussion,
it's only Wednesday. It's long in the week, isn't it?
some discussion from your ADs about this idea.
Tell me my colleagues are this entertaining in this moment.
Some discussion from your ADs about, how the selection committee is gonna go about its work for the playoff.
Right.
9-3, what a 9-3 team looks like. I know in the Big Ten, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but they have talked about, digging into some metrics and maybe coming up with some ideas that maybe not this year, but eventually they could present to the selection committee
Right.
and say, here
Yep.
are some guidelines. Is there any work being done in the SEC?
The same thing has been talked about with our eyes open. I think part of the answer, I think, to Brandon is let's go through the process and see what happens. I think I've probably discussed even with you, how do you evaluate, you look at Georgia's schedule, or really look at any of our schedules. You take Alabama 2 years ago with 2 losses at the end of games, both on the road to really high quality teams. How does that become evaluated versus maybe an undefeated team? I think there's a weight on the committee that's new that I want to see how the committee processes that. And my encouragement is that we have an undefeated team, so they're in, is not the standard. It never was the standard. Obviously, that stirred up controversy last year. There is an evaluation about the strength of a team. And I look at Georgia's team last year, who lost 1 game in the very last game of the season. A lot of interesting plays. You're accountable for that. But you're also to be rewarded for the real strength of the schedule. And, I look at Georgia, they're at Alabama, they're at Texas, they're at Ole Miss. I'd be hard pressed to name another team that's going to face what I understand the predictions for next season would place as away games with that kind of quality. So I think the selection committee, and we've talked about this a bit, and the CFP management committee has to cope with what that means when you get down to selecting the best teams, those 7 non-conference champion teams to participate and fill out the 12-team
Should
bracket.
Georgia have been in the playoff last year?
It's not up to me. They weren't. So
I'm asking your opinion.
yeah, I'm not giving it.
Do you trust the selection committee?
Yeah, we've entrusted them. Period. They have a hard role, and I think they've performed well over time. There have been differences of opinion, and it's not about last year. You can look at things and say, well, I wonder if that was the right decision. Yeah, we've entrusted them with that decision making, and I'm okay. I'm comfortable with that.
Do you trust them going forward with this new role?
Well, we've entrusted them.
Greg, they're the only body that does this that doesn't show their work at some point. Should the public and the media be able to see how they arrive at those decisions in some way?
Yeah, I don't think it's the only body that doesn't show its work.
AD coaches,
Yeah, but I mean, those are opinion polls that don't actually.
they're an opinion.
Hang on, I let you talk.
I
So,
know.
guy can't have a comma in the middle of a sentence. Those are opinion polls that don't feed into the actual placement of teams in a playoff. So, they show the result of their work, and they do explain. Now, whether that's the depth you want, there may be just disagreements. We do invite. I've never been to the mock selection process to try to understand it. There's a net, right, for the NCAA basketball tournament, and there may be a team that's really well rated in the net that's not selected, and there may be a team. There have been teams in the 70s, and so that you wonder about, well, can I see that homework? And you hear a little bit of explanation, but not the level of detail. So I don't think it's the only circumstance where you don't have full insight, and at some point, these committees are entrusted with making that decision.
We got one more question, please.
You still moving this to Galveston to appease the west side?
I did that with the Southland Conference, and it was a wonderful experience, but no, we're not. Is the San Luis Resort, is that in Galveston by memory? Yep. Southland Conference meetings were in Galveston.
Water's not quite as clear.
The beach is a little bit different sand, right? So no.
Got truck tracks in it.
Yeah.
Revenue camp,
Yeah.
televised.
Okay. Good to see you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks for the smile.